Hey, do you love subscriptions for apps and smart home services? So do I. Subscriptions suck, but maybe not having subscriptions is actually worse. Everywhere you look, subscriptions are creeping into our lives, especially when it comes to smart things. Gone are the days when buying technology was a one-time purchase and it would work until the magic smoke came out. But now, companies want a long tail. A few dollars every month here for an increased shareholder value there. And I think I can speak for everyone, this sucks. That said, while I don't like subscriptions, especially surprise rug pull subscriptions and crippleware plays, what if I told you that the so-called no subscription required for smart technology might actually be worse? In this video, I'm going to dive into the problems with insidious subscriptions, the problems with no subscription required offerings, and what you as a consumer can do about it. For a time, things were simple. We used money to buy and own things. And those things that we bought would function as expected until they died or we upgraded. Smart technology started hitting the consumer market around 2010 or a little bit after, with things like Philips Hue smart light bulbs, Nest smart thermostats, and eventually cloud-based security cameras like Wise and Blink. The smartification of our things offered intelligent features in an easy-to-use and consume friendly form factor. Typically managed through a mobile phone app, smart technologies leverage the cloud to provide an intermediary to centralize the services, your data, and provide seamless remote management. At first, there were no subscriptions, just a product that worked as advertised as long as it could connect to the internet. But by the mid-2010s, many smart tech companies started introducing value-added subscriptions to their basic included features, such as more video storage. And that is when the slope got slippery. So let's talk about the insidious case of surprise subscriptions and crippleware. In recent years, the manufacturers we instilled our trust in when we purchased their products, outright I might add, have started to introduce surprise bolt-on subscriptions, with the consequences of losing some or all of the features and functionality if you don't pay. Some could call this ransomware, but that name has already been taken. Don't believe me? Here is a small sampling of cringe-worthy rug pulls by the brands we have or did trust. So for the award for the dumbest surprise subscription, that's going to go to BMW's heated seats. In 2022, BMW proposed an $18 a month subscription for heated seats. Yes, the heated seats already installed in the vehicle that you've already purchased. Needless to say, a large swath of doctors and lawyers pushed back on BMW and they backed down. Now the award for the biggest cash grab goes to the snoo. Now this one is personal for me. A friend had bragged that he had purchased some redonkulous baby industrial complex smart tech called a snoo. I sort of laughed at him at first, because it's a $1,500 bassinet or baby bed that would rock them to sleep and provide some stats on an app. And that's really all it did. 3 days after my son arrived home and 6 hours before COVID lockdown, my wife and I were sleep deprived and I grabbed a fistful of cash and found the last snoo in Vancouver before lockdown. And the snoo is a godsend in the first few weeks of a newborn's life. But the snoo is only useful for about 3 to 6 months, and naturally a secondhand resale market sprung up to pass them on to the next desperate and sleep deprived family. The manufacturer didn't like that desperate parents were saving a few dollars by buying a used snoo off Craigslist. And in a pretty ruthless move, they introduced monthly subscription for secondhand buyers, as well as any family that wants to have more than 2 kids. And lastly, the award for the biggest crippleware play goes to Bambu Labs. Bambu Labs is a maker of one of the best consumer-grade 3D printers on the market. And recently, they released an optional firmware that would remove features and cripple workflows of many power users. The new firmware was intended to improve security of the device by blocking third parties from accessing and interacting with the printer. The problem is, people who purchased that printer purchased it for those features. And this move is seen as a preemptive action to add censoring to printers, control what filament can be used in that printer. Does that sound like ink cartridges again? And of course, lay the foundations for a subscription model. And on the security front, maybe they need to have some self-reflection. This is because this fiasco invited hackers to jiggle the doorknob of their app and certs and private keys fell out. And now as consumers, we're not stoked. Culturally, we have grown accustomed to monthly fees for services, but now manufacturers of consumer goods are seeking to capitalize on the reoccurring revenue model as well. ARR achievement unlocked. This shift is fundamentally disrupting the millennia-old concept of commerce and ownership, and to no surprise, it's making consumers unhappy. We like the idea of buying something and owning it outright. We like the idea of buying from brands we trust, but not feeling tethered to them. But to be the devil's advocate, we aren't buying inanimate objects anymore. We're buying things that have software in them and many times rely on external systems and technology. Thus, we might need to rethink what it means to own something versus merely having access to it when it comes to technology. And I definitely don't mean heated seats. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, so let's dig into smart stuff a bit more first. All right, so here's the unofficial Smartifying Stuff 101 course. So what does it mean to smartify something and what's involved? So at its core, smartifying something simply means integrating a microcontroller into an otherwise regular thing to enhance its functionality. Whether it's processing some data, controlling it remotely or through an app, or integrating it into other things, the goal is to make the product smarter and more convenient to us, the consumer. Initially, this started with USB and Bluetooth integrations, allowing communications with computers and later mobile devices. Then came the concept of Internet of Things, connecting these smart devices to centralized cloud services via the internet. Cloud was instrumental in the smartification of our thing. Microprocessing options were limited and lacked the performance and storage needs for applications such as cameras. We take for granted the ubiquity of low-cost microprocessors such as the ESP32, Arduinos, and Raspberry Pis. But back then, there are very few options available that would meet the trifecta of price, form factor, and performance. Cloud-native, message buses, and microservices were the hotness of the early 2010s and really enabled IoT. They provided centralization, scalability, and high availability, all things you need if you're going to have people rely on you to turn their lights on and off. The hub and spoke architecture centralized IoT backend services, enabling manufacturers to have one code base, one platform that their edge devices would phone home to, share data with, download updates, and all the other stuff. Additionally, this would also enable better innovation and evolve the product. However, now this is the quiet part out loud, it also allowed for a secondary monetization play, such as selling your data or shimming advertisements into your stuff. Lastly, it needed to be easy for the users. USB and Bluetooth, even to this day, can go sideways. By migrating users' onboarding and product management to a mobile device, which most consumers were comfortable with using, manufacturers substantially reduced the support overhead and allowed for mass adoption. But IoT had and still does have problems of its own. First, there's the manufacturers who are very eager to smartify their stuff and get it to market. This resulted in cases of prominent brands who didn't know a thing about cloud, software, or security, outsourcing the software development and cloud infrastructure build-outs to third parties, who likely didn't know about security and privacy needs and was incentivized to produce fast and cheap, but certainly not good. And you know where I'm going with that. Second, centralizing remote access to people's homes and data creates an attractive target for cyber criminals to go after, which has resulted in several instances of one single breach impacting hundreds of thousands of users. Privacy laws and other regulations weren't a thing back then, so it was the Wild West of reckless go-to-market innovations with zero consequences. Lastly, this marks a turning point for consumers, whether they knew it or not. IoT and the smartification of things meant your data and your digital lives were now stored on someone else's computer. That's the cloud. And your data, no longer under your control and arguably not just yours. And it gets even darker. To save costs, manufacturers start outsourcing the management and support of their infrastructure to third parties as well, who abuse the lack of security in the applications. To gain unauthorized access to people's camera streams, many times those cameras being inside the house, and that's terrible. And what happens when that IoT company gets acquired or worse, goes bankrupt? The best case, consumers' relationship changes slightly, probably a subscription fee, and maybe the product stops working. But worse, if they go bankrupt, the joke of a privacy policy you thought was protecting you is now null and void, and your data has been sold to the highest bidder. And I bet you didn't sign up for that. But maybe we need to start getting used to subscriptions, and here's why. I am no fan of subscriptions, and later in this video I will share how I keep my monthlies low, but more importantly my privacy high. But for now, hear me out. So no subscription required for a cloud-based service is just not sustainable. There's a cost for running the cloud infrastructure. There's a cost for maintaining the software. And I'm not even talking about improving or adding features, just ensuring the base software stays secure and continues to work. So say you bought a smart thing and it costs you $25 and it requires cloud to work. So how long do you expect it to actually function for? And I don't mean until the magic smoke comes out. How long will the service last? So if we break it down, the hardware probably costs $10 to manufacture, so we have $15 to play with here. And the manufacturer's gonna want a healthy margin out of this to keep the shareholders happy. So let's say we have $7.50 to support the cloud infrastructure and maintain the software of that smart thing. How long will it last? 10 years? Definitely not. 5 years? Probably not. 2 years? Maybe? I recall my dad was quite upset when I suggested he needed to replace his smartphone because it was quite old, 5 years I think, and no longer was receiving updates and certainly very vulnerable. Ah, Android. Now, he comes from a different era. That era where you buy something and you use it until it breaks. However, times have changed and the old school mentality doesn't factor in or really understand that smart things have software in them that will break virtually before they ever break physically, if not maintained. And that's the problem. We as consumers really aren't willing to pay what it truly costs to manufacture and then maintain something for our ideal lifespan. Let's look at that $500 Android phone. It would likely cost $2,000 or more just to fund the software development team to continue to maintain and secure the software. Now, if you've been in IT, this shouldn't be a surprise to you. We call them maintenance contracts, and the monies we pay fund the manufacturer to retain the talent to keep things working. And even then, they will end of life you on your favorite devices. So, is there a better way? Of course. My recommendation for the vast majority of consumers, be careful with which manufacturers you get into bed with, but accept that subscriptions are here to stay, and the trade-offs or benefits is improved longevity, supportability, and security of the technologies, thus your digital life. Most of the time. But if you've got a little hacker in you like I do, and rather not pay subscriptions or be dependent on a third-party company to hold your data and turn on your lights, that's ridiculous. And if you like your privacy, maybe you can avoid some or all of those subscriptions. And here's how. Install Home Assistant locally in a container, in a VM, or on a Raspberry Pi or old computer. There are thousands of videos on YouTube on how to do so. Go find that. If you haven't heard of Home Assistant, it is the DMZ for all smart things in your life and home. It has a vibrant open source community who has figured out how to integrate almost every smart device on the market, as long as they're not getting sued. Chamberlain. And Home Assistant is great at reducing the need to install separate mobile apps for every device, connecting them to the internet, and best of all, requiring a subscription. Next, with the power of Home Assistant's community, research and understand the technologies and products. Most smart devices connect over Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or Zigbee. Wi-Fi stuff generally wants to get out to the internet, whereas Bluetooth and Zigbee generally don't need the internet. While I have a mixture of all the above, I only purchase things that can work in an offline mode only. And you bet I firewall all that stuff too. And that's because I don't care to have someone on the other side of the world able to connect to my cameras, unlock my front door, or even turn on lights. Now I should say offline mode isn't always advertised, so some research may be required. The Home Assistant integration page is great for that. All right, so that rain is getting much heavier, so I'm going back to the car. But in closing, the way we're consuming technology is shifting from a straightforward purchase model to an as-a-service expense, whether we like it or not. So while I've managed to dodge the insidious subscriptions through a mix of stubbornness, voting with my wallet, and clever workarounds, I can't help wonder how long that will last before I'm really needing to sign up for every subscription. And that's because ensuring the functionality and security of software in our smart devices comes at an ongoing cost. And the traditional one-time purchase model, while appealing, will only result in one outcome: outdated, unsupported, and vulnerable smart devices around our house that stop working at best and get hacked at worst. And not because they're broken, but because it wasn't economical for the manufacturer to continue supporting them, and we weren't willing to pay. So that was just a toe dip into a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I look forward to sharing my smart home journey and how I've done some really cool things without sacrificing my wallet or privacy. So leave your comments and questions of where I should go next. And to appease our true overseers, the algorithms, like and subscribe for more. And I will see you in the future.